welcome. Thank you for being here. So the title is Why OData Should Be the Thing we should all be discussing. Um, First, my name is Fabrice Nordmann from One More Thing. For those who don't know me, I was born a long time ago. I founded One More Thing somewhere in between. And I'm always asked the relationship between the two, so just fmcloud.fm is just the hosting and licensing branch of One More Thing. So this is why sometimes you see me with one light blue and sometimes in black and white. This is the reason. So now to the subject. OData. What is OData? Can you raise your hand if you have used OData with or without FileMaker? Okay, yeah, many people. And who didn't use OData but know a bit of what it is, attended some sessions or not? Okay. So altogether it's about 100% of the room. Okay. So OData is, they call themselves, the standard is the best way to rest, and that was enough to convince me that it was a good tool. The sentence below basically says it's the tool that it's a standard that you can use to build an API, a RESTful API to your application, and of course to use it as well. So in fact, it has become very easy to open your apps, your custom apps, to the world with an API. Actually, Claris did the work for you, so you have nothing to do except send a bill for having deployed a wonderful standard API to your app. Okay, so why don't you use it yet? Of course, this slide was made before I knew that you were all already using it, but this was valid a year ago, but you know, a bad surprise. So the first reason why people took their time before using it is because the first versions of the documentation was a nightmare. It was a copy-paste from the OData website without any sort of interpretation. And so it was very, very difficult to be enthusiastic about it. You would basically read that and then just go to the next feature. So now it has improved a lot. There is a typical guide and documentation, and I really recommend that you save it. There are not so many pages. Save it to your hard drive and read this on your way back home, because now it's a very tiny documentation, very readable, and once you've read it, you can completely use the OData API, and it's great. The second reason is the first implementation was very, very limited. And we all, it's not only for OData, we've got to get used to the fact that Claris is now agile. So they release features that are not so nice at first, but then with releases, it improves. And that's especially the case with OData. So now with OData, where they are now with 21.1, FileMaker 21.1, that was released 2 weeks ago, is they caught up with the mandatory part of the standard version 4.01. It means there is more in 4.01, but the other parts are, optional. So why is it so special? OData is only the nth gateway to interact with your FileMaker server. Of course, there is the classic FileMaker protocol that you use with FileMaker Pro Go. There's WebDirect, everyone knows, and there used to be, and there is still custom web publishing. There used to be instant web publishing. There's been OData. At some point there was direct XSLT, and there is, well, OData, ODBC, and of course the data API. So OData is just one of them. But what makes it so special? It's completely standard. It's the first time, I think, where, and this is probably the most important thing in the end. There are a number of things, but the most important thing is it's completely standard. It means you need no knowledge of FileMaker concepts at all to use OData. It means you can talk to a web developer outside, working for your clients on a website or whatever. They don't need to know that you're using FileMaker as a backend, and it would make zero difference if it was something else. So first time, they don't have to understand what a layout is, what a script is, so on and so forth, okay? They can use scripts, we'll see that, but if they know how to use OData, they know how to use your API, and that's great, that's fantastic. You don't have to explain, layout is a strange word that Claris invented 30 years ago to represent a view. No, it's not like that, it's just plain standard. Okay, no FileMaker concepts such as layout and portal. And also this implies there's no dependency to a layout. So this is pro and con at the same time. With other gateways such as custom web publishing or data API, you're talking to a layout and you're getting your response from a layout, which means you can shape your response by adding objects, fields, and portals on a layout. Okay, with OData, you can't do that, which is mostly a good thing, but it's also, I must say, it's also something like very nice to be able to, just want to add something to your response. Yeah, just add it to a layout. That's neat. You don't have that with OData. Okay, it's transactional. And this is, you should cheer up and, transactional. Wonderful. So you can do a lot of stuff in a single transaction. If it fails, it's reverted. Nothing to do, it's transactional by default. And we can see it's even more than that, but it's transactional, so it's fantastic. Also, as opposed to data API, it requires a single call because of the authentication method. It doesn't need a token, so with a single call, you can authenticate and do the rest. You don't need to call to get a token, then a second call, to write the database or run a script or whatever, which makes it ideal for webhooks. So with services where you can, control the payload of your webhooks, it's great. I mean, you can configure them and they talk directly to, and if we have time, I have an example. So, OData can also alter the database schema. So you can create a table, add a field, do stuff like that. Why would you? I'm not sure, but you can. I tried just to sum up, the differences between data API and OData. This is not an extensive list. There are more differences. But data API has its own native query language, right? So it's completely different. The calls are not translated into a Draco typical queries, okay, which makes it very, very efficient in performance. OData as SQL, as as XML and so on, On the contrary, the requests, they are first translated into Draco typical queries before they're processed. Okay? So if you're after pure performance, in theory, Data API is still better. Okay? Because it's a direct call to Node.js, and it's a different way to ask to query the database. Okay, this I mentioned earlier, tokens for Data API, so you need 2 calls to do something. Basic calls for OData. The other bullet point, I mentioned it already, depends on layouts and portals. But with OData, you can also use the relationship graph. So, but without a layout, but you're still talking to a table occurrence, and you can create your joins or use the ones that are already in the relationship graph. Okay, so you can have a query that says, I want my contact and slash the invoices of that contact, right? You can do that. After the schema, mentioned already, transactional, mentioned already, and the Data API has a script step. It's not server only. We have a execute FileMaker Data API script step. Okay, now OData was not there yet because they were still catching up to match completely the requirements of the standard of OData 4. And now I hope we will get this pretty soon. And then this really becomes very, very nice. Okay, OData against ODBC, JDBC. Well, ODBC requires, if you query your FileMaker server, ODBC requires ODBC connector, which is actually now just installed by the click of a button in the admin console, so that's not really an issue. And so ODBC is not aware of the relationship graph, and you can query just using SQL, where OData has its own query language. It's very similar. You will see it's very similar if you understand SQL. OData is piece of cake, but it's not as powerful as SQL. So there are still good reasons why you might want to use ODBC. If we have time, or if you ask a question at the end, I can talk a little bit about that, the limitations of that. And SQL has lots of functions, and there are not no functions. Not many functions with OData. There are some, especially the biggest limitation is that you cannot use them on the select part. You can use it on the filter part, which is the where. I'll come to that later. So now, enough slides. Playground. So I've designed a wonderful, beautiful file. It's flat design. We had a team. We came to, after 3 mock-ups, we said, okay, this is good. So first, I'll do something that you should never do, expose your credentials, but here I will just declare my authentication once and for all in a global variable. Is it big enough for everyone? Okay, so I'm just declaring a basic global variable, so the other scripts just don't need to do that all the time, okay? So I have asked ChatGPT to generate 10,000 records, contact records, because Philip said this is very boring, so. And with different data types, so we can play a little bit. And here I have some scripts. So the first thing I can activate a record, and I will get the current record data. Okay, so we'll look at the script just in a minute. This is the URL that was called. So you can see, actually, I don't have my glasses, so I hope it's correct. This is going to be a get. Okay, I'm reading out of the database, so it's a get message. There is no sorry. It's here. The dump is here. Oh, sorry, I can't see the thing. Should have taken my glasses. Stupid me. Okay, so I didn't specify a method here, so it's a get. Okay, I'm reading from the database, and this is very simple. I'm asking the contact and the contacts table, and I'm passing a UUID. Okay, and I am asking, give me the data from that record with UUID this. Okay, so is that clear for everyone? Okay, now I get the result here as JSON. I'm not supposed to move, but I will be off the frame. That's not a big issue. So I get the data here, okay, in the body part, and I have some other information with a link to edit, a link which is actually the to read, right? The ID thing is what I just sent, actually, okay? But the very interesting thing in that call is that I just specified the UUID. I didn't say where the ID field equals that, right? So it's interesting that, because FileMaker guessed that I was talking about this record. Oh, interesting. So it's considering that this ID field is somehow a primary key. Okay, it guessed. So I want to stop here. I want to go into all that detail later on, but this is very interesting thing. I will show you later how you can make explicitly a field a primary key. Now, currently, FileMaker does a guess, and it's the same algorithm that is also used in the data migration tool. So it looks at different factors in your database definition, such as is the field validation unique? So this is very important. If is it defined by a serial number, things like that. Altogether, it has its own business rule, and it determines, okay, well, I have two fields that are unique, but this one is a serial number, so I'll choose that this one must be probably the primary key. Okay, so it does something like that. It's also used in the data migration tool. I will show you a way to make it explicit, so FileMaker has no doubt about what's your primary key. Okay. So now to the next example. So get current record, but a single field. Oh, sorry. Maybe first I will run the script in the debugger modes. The same script that I run. I won't do it for every script because they are basically all the same. But okay, so this is just a documentation, right? And here what I'm doing is I'm clearing the globals just to make sure that the result I see is not the one from the previous call. And this is table occurrence. I determine the table occurrence I'm talking to, then the URL, then the curl options. Okay, because I zoomed in, you think it's empty, but it's not empty. I'm going to show them here. Curl options are this. Okay, this is the most important thing, of course. Here it's a get method, so I don't specify it. I could, but get is, oh yeah, I did actually. I thought it would be more explicit, so it says get, right? And I'm and I'm pushing some um, data, which is some JSON, in, and I save it as a dump. Okay, and you see I have also something which used to be very important until 2 weeks ago. This prefer return minimal. You see here, which would shrink the result or make it null when possible, and that was saving some traffic on your quota on your because until 2 weeks ago you had to pay more if you wanted to use your own data on your own server. This is over now. So now this is less important, but still it can, if you are still using a lot of the data, well, it makes things faster, of course. And then just simply insert and then put all this in the different global fields that are on the layout, so you can just see them. Okay? That's as easy as that, right? So now to the next example. Next example is get current record, but just a single field. And here is what I have. So this is, I asked for this particular contact, just give me this field, and this is what I get. Okay? It's very easy, very short call. This is real. I mean, it's live example. The server is somewhere, I don't know where, in Frankfurt, I think. Okay, so it's really live. Okay, now I'm going to ask, change record, so I'm going to ask for the current record row ID. So row ID here is returned here, is the, there is a dictionary. In the documentation there is a dictionary of FileMaker terminology against OData terminology. It's quite straightforward, but row ID is exactly the record ID in FileMaker. So this is the internal record ID, okay? So you can, if you look at the URL here, here I did a select. Select is one of the statements that we can do. So you remember there is a query language in OData. I said it looks a bit like SQL. It really looks very similar, in fact. And I'll come to that later with more complicated statements. But here I'm selecting, and I don't have to select a field. I can also select the row ID. I could select a field and a row ID, for instance. I could select, let's say, no, I have to change the script to do it. I could, but the row ID is available directly from OData. Okay, I'm saying this is interesting. Why? Because you can get some data, compile them, make it a list of them, create a snapshot, for instance, mimic it. You can, I mean, you can, I'm not going into details, but you can do a lot. The sky is the limit. You can, getting the record ID is often interesting. Okay, now we are going to create a record. And, we're in FileMaker, so the created record will appear at the end of the found set. So, okay, I'm just here, and now I'm going to create a record, and it's here. Okay, so this is created by OData. How cool is that? Okay, so I'm here. If you see, so the call looks like that. Just simply contact, right? So that's fairly simple. How does it know where the name and first name come from, and why is it now creating a record instead of reading it? It's just because here I said, now, um, my glasses, it's terrible. Yeah, it's not the field I wanted. Okay. Sorry, I don't know. Yeah, okay. I can't read. I said I was born a long time ago. That's the problem. So, create record was this one. Okay. Now I'm debugging it. And curl options, what do the curl options tell me? Now I'm doing a post. Okay. So the API OData is completely standard. So to read, you use get. To create, you use post. To modify, you use patch. To delete, you use delete. That's fair enough. Not difficult. Now they did it. As opposed to data API, where it's, for instance, you have to use get to run a script. Why? So you can't send a long parameter, by the way. So you do it that way, which means the data that you're sending is going to be a JSON object, JSON body. So here I have some data. Okay. And I'm simply, with the curl options, I'm simply uploading this data variable, like a file, okay? And that's it. Okay, so now I'm creating a record again. Of course, I can delete a record. Works. I will create it again. And is it visible for everyone? So I created again, and let's create a couple of them. Like that, yeah, they're here. And I can now modify some record. Okay, so this was modified by OData. Okay, to modify, same idea. I don't need to go into detail really, but it's the same idea. I'm doing what? Here, the curl options say you're going to patch. Okay, that's modify, patch. And the data is this. I just want to change the city to that. Very easy. Now the most interesting is the batch. The batch, I said it was transactional, right? The batch allows you to have one call. You can do all these operations. So you can, with one call of the OData API, you can create, modify, delete records. All okay? So I'm going to, so this is really the most powerful thing. So in this instance, I will myself here, and I batch. And here, what did I do? I modified the record, and I created another one. Okay, single call. So for this one, I'm going to go a little bit into the details because it's a bit more complex. And sorry. Okay. So if we look at the data file, the way I built the script is by adding stuff to my data variable. Okay? I'm doing it in an incremental way. Because you will see it's not so easy with the FileMaker functions to do it in one go. So I prefer to do it that way. So let's look at what the data variable looks like now. Actually, it looks like empty. Yeah, yeah, I just made it empty. And now I'm starting it, right? So if we look at that, um, here is was the beginning of my batch. This is not a valid batch, okay? It's I'm initiating first line. I'm initiating a batch. Actually, it's dash dash anything. We don't care, okay? That's the beginning of the batch. Then I have my first call, okay? First call, I'm going to do HTTP with content ID is number one. This has to be sequential. One of the reasons what I do it with the sequential order in the script. Then the call itself, the post, the content application, the content length, okay, and then only the content, which is difficult to do in a FileMaker process because you don't know the length before you have. So this is why I'm doing it in a sequential order, okay? So this is my first call. Then I add a second call, go back to data. Now it looks like that. So it's just I append some list here, okay. So second call, you see this is a patch. First was a post, the second is a patch, okay. And again, and content ID this time is number 2. It wouldn't work if it was number 3, okay. And again the length, and then the data, okay. This is still not a valid batch. And now I'm closing the batch with this. This is the end of this, okay. Now this is a valid batch, but it's in fact almost a valid batch. Okay, so we won't come back to that later. So just keep it in mind. The file will be available anyway. But then I'm doing a last operation, and then this is valid batch now. I'm just substituted character 13, our typical FileMaker carriage return, with char 10. Otherwise, this won't work. Okay. So now I have a valid batch. So here, all the carriage return have been changed. Okay. So keep in mind here, the white lines, the carriage return, they're there for a reason. It's not so obvious. So there is a real syntax here. It's not. There's no place for style here. It's just it should be that way. Okay, and then I'm just sending that batch, and it will process the 2 calls. And there are 2 only. Okay, and if one of them fails, then the whole transaction is cancelled, reverted. Okay. I don't have an example here because I don't even think I used it but there is even a way to have sub-transactions. Okay, they call it change sets. So within a batch, you can have change sets. They are just like batches in batches, if you want. They call it change set. And then you can have a transaction. It's parts of the transaction, right? A change set is a single transaction, and another change set is another. Okay, so you can have a part of the transaction that is reverted, and the other one is committed and passed. Okay. Next example. Okay, now it becomes interesting. So I built just I built just a small thing just to be able to query the database and GTR to the results. Okay, so my script is going to fetch records using filter. So this time I'm going to ask what are all the Johns in my database. Okay, so I'm doing this, and it got 150, I think, and did a GTR and okay. So how does this look? So this is the query language, the where part of your, and this is really interesting now because you can do a lot of stuff with that. So here, look at the URL. It's that. You see, I'm using spaces and everything. It's weird, but it's very easy. Okay, so you have I'm asking, hey, give me the contacts, and I will filter them where the first name equals John. Okay, this is very simple, but you can imagine you can have you can have different criterias, you can have operations on them. In this part, you can use functions. Okay, so for instance, you can, well, not all of them are supported, but there are functions that you can use here to do comparisons. Okay, it's very cool. And the language itself, it's very simple. It's I will show you the operators then. Okay, so just a small variation of that. I want to have the same filter, but just return the name. Okay, so just give me first name and last name. Don't give me all the rest. Okay, so this is just a combination of things we saw earlier. So this is, sorry, URL. Okay, you see here I have a select, 2 fields, and 3 fields. Oh, and I use here a double quotes because ID is a reserved word. Okay, and filter name is John. Okay.
Need another filter on there. Well, how would you add the second one with just the?
Or you would have and, or, okay. Yeah, it's very simple. Okay, same thing then. Okay, filter plus count. Count is another example. Here is what I sent. Okay, I asked count, return, add the count. So here, just exactly the same as before. If I do filter, you'll see this. And if I have filter plus count, it's just exactly the same, but it added here the count. Okay? It's interesting because you have a limit. You can return. You have an instruction to send limited number of records. Okay, but the count will give you the real count of record that were found. So you can use it very easily to the request returned that many records. I'm just showing you 10, but there were 150 Johns. Okay. Oh, you can also modify plus filter. So this is like becoming really interesting, I think. Now I have it's exactly the equivalent of replace. So now I think the criteria is it found OData in here. Okay, so I have 3 records here. I will modify using filter. So it basically replaced these addresses because it found OData in there. Okay? This is cool, no? Okay, and of course it can delete with filter. Now they're gone. Delete all the records that match this. Okay, and almost finally, it can perform a script. Okay, so this was created by script. Okay. So now it shows some. I'm just going to run it in the debugger, so you can see this is what I am sending. I'm sending this, the script parameter, which means I can send. It's a post, so it's a long. I can send a long script parameter as opposed to OData to data API. Sorry. And the URL is just, I'm going to call random script. I think they introduced a bug in the latest version where spaces in the script names is not supported anymore, but not sure. Maybe I did something wrong while building this sample file. Okay? Very easy. Okay, so now I have some candy. Yeah, it's 42, so I really need to hurry. So this is a script. Yeah, I should have explained a little bit before. You know the limitation that you cannot import a table into itself. So it's not specific with OData. You could do it also with ODBC and everything. But I wrote a XSLT, some XSLT just to help. I will show you how this works. So now I could import. I select all the Johns and I import them again. I'm duplicating the Johns on the same table. How do I do that? So sorry, I need to run this before I can see the candy here. Great. And sorry, so now I have this URL. The URL is going to do what? Okay, it's the same, right? I'm just working on the Johns. Okay, and I want to select them. And here I say accept XML. Okay, by default, the data API, the OData, sorry, works in JSON. But sometimes XML is better because FileMaker does things with XML that it doesn't know how to do with JSON, such as import. So I'm just changing here the curl options. As you can see here, I'm now accepting XML as a result. Okay? So it's exactly the same stuff. And now I have, sorry, the response is there now. It's some XML instead of being JSON, just the same thing but in XML. Now what I do is I just save it to a file in the temporary folder, because import XML can only import from a file. Actually, it can import from it can import from a URL, but you cannot you cannot have curl options. So I have to save that into a file. Now I'm doing the magic here. Insert some XSLT in text. So this is the XSLT that I can show you here. It's better. It looks better here. No, it's not this one. Really? Okay, thanks. Sorry. So it's some XSL I wrote yesterday with the help of ChatGPT, my new best friend, and it just transformed this XML into JSON. And by the way, it fixes the date and number formats for American, European, things. So now I'm safe depending on the file I'm working with. It's going to be important in the correct format. I'm just saving that as a file again, and then I'm simply importing some XML content into my table. Okay? Is there any question on this? It's okay, so now let's go back to the presentation. There were some examples, so a few tips. I really have to hurry, I'm really late. So in batches are difficult to write, so pay attention to using car 10 and leaving the white lines where they should be. Prefer return minimal to avoid consuming your quota or to optimize speed. Containers, I don't have examples, but it's a little bit weird. As opposed to data API, OData is not doing a real good job with containers. It returns them as base 64. So if they are in the same table as the rest of your data, you're going to, it's just impossible. Okay, every time you do a query, you're going to get all the containers as base 64, unless you specify very specific fields every time. So store containers in a different table, which is a good practice anyway, but with OData, it's a real good tip. And when we talk about uploading, writing some containers, sending some containers to the database, strangely enough, only images and PDFs are supported as is. So for the rest, you can just upload them as base 64 and have an auto-enter calc in your container field, to just decode it. All this, it's going to save you time if you start working with that. Okay, so you have JSON, XML, and HTML output. I'm not going to show you, but just I also exported. I did just this exact same request with HTML, text HTML output, and it just got me a HTML table. I don't know why, with header and so on. Okay? So, and also just a tip, sometimes, where you're doing a script transaction, you would like some things to be saved just because in the database because you need them to use them in the transaction, but you can't, So OData is yet another great way to, as PSOS, as many other, but to be in a transaction, but still have a parallel session that does the job in the database while you're still in a transactional mode in your script. So now, I'm sorry, I will be late, but the night is long. But I mentioned earlier the way to explicitly define a field as a primary key. Okay. So this happens in the default fields .xml. If you go to that field, you will see this. So I think there are two notations, and that they are, I think, for every field, you will find this tag list node. And I think the notation that was here until now was this attribute, primary equal true. And I think that this switched, I'm not sure, I think this is like for backward compatibility, that's a Claris religion. And I think this is the part here, this one, this tag here, that makes it a primary key. This is something different. Be careful, the space after is important. This is a different tag. I think it means do not display on default layout. So if you create a table, this field will not be displayed on the default layout because of that tag. But this is a different topic. But the important thing is this one. Okay, this is primary key.
But it can only be done if I create the table afterwards.
Yes, of course, it's not backward.
There's no way to do it later.
Okay, integration made easy. So example here. I will um, send an email to my support to my ticket system. Okay. And now I'm just going to. Okay. I'm going to take the risk. Okay. I received that ticket, right? That's our support ticket. Okay. Just send the email a few seconds ago. And now I'm going to do something, and I want this ticket. Oh, he's on time next door. Uh, and I want this ticket to be found here. Okay? So first, well, I need to switch mode here to import my API key, so you can't grab it, even if you have a. I know these guys, they're all constantly trying to hack the file I'm working on, so I had to hide my API key. So, and now I'm going to do something, and I want, of course, to get my data in my FileMaker database. So I defined a rule, I will show you just later, that if I change the group, and I switch it to OData demo, and I update it, and then go back to FileMaker and it's here. Okay? So this is Freshdesk, our support portal, and now I got the data on the ticket here. Okay? How did I do it? It's a webhook, and I want to give you this one as an example. So not all webhooks are really. You can't control the payload on all webhooks, unfortunately. But with some platforms such as Freshdesk, Twilio, and some others, you have control about what is going to be sent in your webhook. So, just going to the admin system, and this is in the rule, automations, and ticket updates. And this is a rule I defined, okay? And I said, okay, this is the logic. When a ticket is updated and the group is changed to OData demo, this is what triggered the thing. Okay, this is the uninteresting thing. And what does it do? Here, it triggers webhook. Okay, with post. This is the URL with the server and the server address. It's on fmcloud.fm, an excellent service provider, not just kidding. And then the file name, and I'm calling a script in that case. I could push the data directly. Okay, I could. In my opinion, I also prefer to trigger a script, so the script is going to, I have more control, and I can get the ticket. Okay, and I'm using this credentials, and I am pushing this as a body. Okay, as a payload. I'm sorry, this is not the payload, this is the headers. I'm saying this is a return minimal. I don't need to have return, and I want to accept JSON, and this is what I'm sending. This payload is simply the script parameter, and that's it. I'm just sending the ticket ID. Ticket ID being, of course, a placeholder that Freshdesk provides, and it does the substitution. Okay? So isn't that great? And then, of course, on the FileMaker side, because I chose that it should be a script that would receive my, that would do it. I'm not pushing the data directly. I'm just calling a script, and the script pulls it, and this is a standard, API integration. I don't want to go into the detail of that. Right? Okay. So and you can't do that kind of stuff with Data API because of the token thing. Right? There's no service that, where you can configure a webhook where first call you're gonna get token, second call, no, it does not exist. So this is, in its use, it's much similar to, custom web publishing, where you could do everything in one call. Okay. Some resources. this excellent, absolutely excellent blog post by Steve Stemherera from Beeswax. Actually, this guy's blog posts are amazing all the time. If you haven't done so, make sure that everything he writes gets to you. So it's excellent resources, and of course, John Renfrew has published a lot, and he has published a series of videos, long videos, and he has a session tomorrow. And the Claris documentation, I mentioned it earlier. Now it's, as I said, it's really simple and readable, and you learn everything. Everything is in it. What is possible? Sometimes I have to ask ChatGPT just to double check that something is not available in the Claris implementation, which I did earlier, for instance. So I really wanted to be sure that I couldn't use the function in the select part of my call, so I just asked ChatGPT, who said, no, you can use it in the filter part, but not in the select part. So I was not doing something wrong, just it's not there yet. And thank you. And don't forget John's session tomorrow, 9 o'clock, on a more detailed new things of FileMaker 2021.1 with OData. There's new stuff. Do you have questions? We have plenty of time. Shout. I can't see, but I can hear.
Ask the question, and Fabrice, if you can repeat the question.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, so the question is, does all this OData support spaces and field names?
Does OData support spaces in field names? Yes, it does. But if you have some special characters and so on, I suggest that you use double quotes in your queries, just like in SQL, and that will make sure that you have a... Any other question? Aziz? Yeah.
Is the FileMaker documentation documenting the length of the URL if you want to select multiple fields? At some point you arrive to the limit of the URL. Does anybody know?
This is a good question. Actually, there is something I don't understand because you don't even have to encode as URL the spaces you saw with between the operators and so on. So there's something happening. There is some magic happening in pre-processing somehow of the URL, and I must admit I don't know, but I don't think you'll reach the limit any sooner.
So I have a scenario where I've got a lot of fields and I want to select a number of fields. I don't want to select everything, and I'm trying multiple fields, and at some point you just...
With OData? With OData? Oh, okay. Then that must be very long.
Fabrice?
Find the number.
Yeah, maybe repeat the question for the...
So the question was about the maximum length of the URL. So if you have multiple fields, many fields in your select. Okay, I know on the Mac, on the maximum length of a URL is 80,000, which is quite long. On Windows, it's much shorter than that. But somehow I'm a bit surprised how it works with OData, really, because you have this. You don't have to encode URLs, and even if you do, it doesn't work. You have to pass the blanks and so on. So I don't know what's happening. It's beyond my skill. Any other questions?
And this works only on the server when the solution is on the server?
So this works. The question is, does this work only on the server? For now, yes. It's a server-only feature. I forgot to mention, of course, you need to turn on OData on the server, and you need to enable the corresponding extended privilege. Okay, but trust me, we will have a script step soon. It will make its way to Draco, or there will be blood. Another question? It's 501. Yes, question?
Which is the speed of the query of one of these queries? Is it faster than a FileMaker relationship?
Actually, it really uses it uses the relationship graph, but it's as Wes said this morning, it's not a full state application. It doesn't have to have windows and so on and so forth, unless, as usual, when you run a script. So it's the same, and this is the same with Data API or with custom web publishing. Custom web publishing as a real session, but Data API or OData, if you run a script, it really has to build a virtual client, because a script can, open a new window and do stuff like that. So it has to really, but if you do direct call to the data, then it's a semi-state. It's not a real application instance, so it's really fast. Yes, because I think, for instance, for a replace, it doesn't have to, to verify. I mean, it's by default it's transactional, so it just checks once. Did it go? Did it not go? It doesn't have to display anything, or so it's really fast. Yeah, it's not as fast as the Data API though.
I didn't get the magic you did between FreshDesk and your solution, so that FreshDesk doesn't need to present credentials to your solution to send a request. So you were opening
No,
from one side, or
no. FreshDesk has. Sorry. So Benoit did not understand. What? The magic between FreshDesk and FileMaker, how the credentials work.
Yeah.
No, in FreshDesk you can specify I give FreshDesk some credentials.
So okay.
So is it still here? I don't know why I lost my mouse here. Here, see, I have some credentials here.
Okay.
So you can authenticate.
They are presented in the posts of the
Yes,
requests.
absolutely. I'm saying this is basic authentication, and I'm giving the password. Some do not require authentication. This one does. So
Thank you.
For calling the script to run, do you need high-level credential, read, or is it possible to have read-only or run?
yes, of course. I mean, it's just security.
If you don't write data direct, you are calling the script, and the script has pull data to
Well,
pull the data.
it's so the question is about the credential level. It's just basic, absolutely basic FileMaker security paradigm. So you just enter with some credentials against. So it checks against the account and says, okay, this account with the OData extended privilege has this privilege set. This privilege set has, for instance, no access to data, but it's able to run the script. Okay, I run the script. And the script may, for instance, run another script in full access mode. Oh, suddenly I have everything and so on. Okay.
The batching, if you call a script at the end of a batch to process the data you created just now.
The question is, can I call a script in a batch at the end of a batch? The answer is no, unfortunately. Neither, you can't have a script in a batch. Only CRUD operations.
If you've enabled external authentication on your FileMaker solution, how would you handle that, particularly if you say you've got
So, so the question is, how would it work if you have two-factor authentication? Well, then you ask FreshDesk to buy a mobile, and when you receive the SMS, no, no. Yeah, I mean, of course, you can integrate. It's just a matter of how you can configure this webhook thing, but there are not so many places where there are not so many services where you can configure a webhook with, you know, OAuth, for instance. The truth is, there isn't really. It would support it though. It's just the FileMaker security thing.
We've got some.
One thing I wanted to mention, of course, Claris Connect would be an excellent candidate to use this. Unfortunately, the connector for FileMaker Server is only to Data API in Connect. So I think it would be a nice idea to insist that we have a connector against the OData connector of a FileMaker Server, especially that they said this morning that services, connections between Connect and FileMaker would become free. So that would make even more sense to have it with OData.